Hello everyone. Tonight, let's travel back to a world that woke long before the sun ever touched the sky. While kings and nobles slept beneath heavy blankets, an entire hidden world was already alive in silence. Fires were rekindled, horses prepared, bread baked, and cold stone halls slowly warmed by unseen hands. Who were the people shaping medieval mornings while everyone else dreamed? And what really happened in those quiet hours before sunrise? Close your eyes, relax, and let's gently step into the peaceful, forgotten life of medieval servants before dawn. Long before the first pale light of dawn touched the horizon, medieval servants were already awake, moving quietly through castles, manor houses, monasteries, and humble village homes, while most of society still slept. Their work began in darkness, guided only by candlelight, starlight, or the faint glow of embers left from the previous night's fires. Sleep for servants was rarely long or comfortable. Many rested on straw pallets in kitchens, lofts, corridors, or shared servant quarters, often rising after only a few hours, because the smooth functioning of an entire household depended on preparations completed before sunrise. The pre-dawn hours belonged almost entirely to them, a hidden world of labour that ensured nobles, clergy, and townsfolk could wake to warmth, food, cleanliness, and order without ever witnessing the exhausting effort behind it. The first task in many households was tending the fires. Since fireplaces rarely burned through the entire night, servants known as scullions, or kitchen boys, hurried to revive dying embers. They knelt beside hearths, blowing carefully into ashes, feeding dry kindling straw or thin sticks until flames returned. This was essential because fire provided heat, light, and cooking capability. In winter months, failing to relight fires quickly meant rooms would remain freezing. Food preparation would be delayed, and masters might wake displeased. Ashes from the hearth had to be cleared and saved, as they were valuable for cleaning or soap making. Sparks sometimes caught clothing or straw floors, so servants worked cautiously, despite fatigue, knowing that a careless moment could start a deadly fire. Water collection followed soon after. Most medieval homes lacked indoor plumbing, meaning servants walked to wells, rivers, or communal pumps, carrying heavy buckets balanced on wooden yokes across their shoulders. Before sunrise was the best time to gather clean water before villagers crowded the source. This water served multiple purposes: cooking, washing hands, cleaning floors, brewing ale, preparing animals' feed, and filling basins for nobles' morning grooming rituals. In cold seasons, servants broke thin layers of ice covering wells or streams, their hands numbed by freezing water while breath formed clouds in the darkness. Kitchen servants then began food preparation long before anyone expected breakfast. Bread dough might need kneading hours earlier so it could rise properly. Grain was ground using hand querns when mill flour was unavailable, producing coarse meal for porridge or bread. Porridge was among the most common morning foods, requiring slow simmering over newly revived fires. Servants chopped onions, herbs, salted meats, or leftover vegetables from the previous day, ensuring nothing went to waste. In great households, cooks supervised teams preparing elaborate meals, while in smaller homes, a single servant handled all tasks alone. The smell of baking bread often became the first signal that morning approached. Meanwhile, chamber servants attended to private rooms. They opened shutters carefully to allow fresh air to circulate, though this was done gradually to avoid waking occupants too early. Night pots left beside beds had to be emptied discreetly and cleaned thoroughly, an unpleasant but necessary duty. Straw bedding was shaken to remove insects and dust, blankets straightened, and clothing laid out according to rank and weather. Wealthy nobles expected garments warmed near the fire, so they would not feel cold linen against their skin. Servants polished boots, brushed cloaks, and ensured jewellery or belts were ready for the day's activities. Stable servants and grooms began work even earlier than indoor staff. Horses required feeding before sunrise because travel, hunting, or messenger duties often started at first light. Grooms entered dark stables carrying lanterns, their footsteps echoing softly as animals shifted and snorted. They mucked out stalls, replacing soiled straw with fresh bedding, brushed horses' coats to prevent disease, checked hooves for stones or injury, and filled troughs with water and hay. War horses belonging to knights demanded especially careful attention, as their strength and health represented military readiness and noble prestige. Outside, agricultural servants and peasants attached to manor estates prepared tools for the day's labour. Ploughs were inspected, oxen harnessed, and carts repaired before fields filled with activity. The early start allowed farmers to take advantage of daylight hours, particularly during planting or harvest seasons when timing determined survival. Women servants might milk cows or goats before sunrise because animals followed natural rhythms, producing milk best in the quiet early hours. Fresh milk then travelled quickly to kitchens where it became cheese, butter, or morning drink. Cleaning occupied another large portion of pre-dawn work. Floors made of stone or packed earth were swept using reed brooms, while rushes scattered across floors were replaced periodically to remove accumulated dirt and waste. Tables in great halls were wiped clean after previous feasts, benches arranged neatly, and tapestries shaken to remove dust. Candlesticks had to be trimmed so wicks burned properly throughout the day. Servants also ensured hallways remained free of clutter, since noble households valued orderly appearance as a sign of wealth and discipline. Laundry servants sometimes began soaking garments before sunrise, particularly linens used by nobility or clergy. Washing required enormous effort because soap was scarce and water heavy to transport. Clothes were scrubbed against rough boards or stones, then wrung by hand and hung to dry whenever daylight allowed. Preparing washing tubs early ensured enough time to complete tasks before evening. In monasteries and convents, novices and lay servants followed strict schedules aligned with prayer hours, balancing manual labour with religious devotion. Religious routines strongly influenced medieval mornings. In Christian Europe, church bells often rang before sunrise for matins or lauds, signalling both spiritual and practical beginnings of the day. Servants paused briefly for prayer, sometimes reciting memorized verses while continuing physical work. Monastic servants lit candles in chapels, arranged prayer books, and prepared incense so clergy could begin services immediately. Even in secular households, devotion formed part of daily rhythm, reinforcing hierarchy and belief that labour itself honoured divine order. Personal grooming preparations also depended entirely on servants. Basins filled with warm water were carried upstairs for washing faces and hands. Towels, combs, and scented herbs were arranged carefully. Wealthy individuals rarely dressed themselves completely. Servants laced garments, fastened belts, tied sleeves, and ensured layers were worn correctly according to fashion and status. Before sunrise, these preparations had to be nearly complete so masters could appear composed and authoritative. Once morning activities began, messenger servants and pages sometimes prepared letters or announcements during early hours. Candles burned as scribes copied documents, sealed correspondence with wax, or organized deliveries to neighboring estates. Pages practiced duties quietly, polishing armor or arranging weapons needed for the day's training or travel. Knights expected equipment ready at dawn, and failure reflected poorly on household discipline. In urban settings, servants working for merchants or craftsmen opened shops before sunrise. Apprentices swept storefronts, displayed goods, counted inventory, and prepared tools for masters. Bakers were among the earliest workers in medieval towns. Ovens had to reach proper temperature hours before customers arrived. The glow of bakeries often illuminated otherwise dark streets, and servants transported fresh bread to markets while the sky still held stars. Silence defined much of this pre-sunrise labor. Servants learned to move quietly to avoid waking superiors prematurely. Communication occurred through whispers, gestures, and practiced routines repeated daily. Hierarchy shaped every interaction. Senior servants supervised juniors, ensuring tasks followed precise order. Experienced house stewards coordinated schedules, so kitchens, stables, and chambers functioned seamlessly together. Physical hardship marked these hours. Many servants worked barefoot or in simple shoes on cold stone floors. Hunger was common since they often ate only after masters were served. Injuries from lifting water, chopping wood, or handling animals accumulated over time. Yet despite exhaustion, servants developed strong communities among themselves, sharing jokes, stories, and small comforts while working side by side in darkness. Seasonal differences affected pre-dawn routines significantly. Winter mornings demanded longer fire preparation and extra effort to prevent freezing pipes or animals. Summer required earlier starts to avoid midday heat. During festivals or feast days, servants worked even earlier to prepare elaborate decorations, large meals, and guest accommodations. On hunting days, activity intensified as horses, hunting dogs, and equipment needed meticulous readiness before noble parties departed. Children serving as apprentices or young helpers learned responsibility quickly during these hours. They observed older workers, memorizing sequences of tasks that sustained households. Pre-sunrise labor became a form of education, teaching discipline, endurance, and social hierarchy. Many servants spent their entire lives within such routines, rarely experiencing mornings without work. The emotional landscape of these early hours varied. Some servants appreciated the calm before noble households awoke, finding peace in predictable routines and quiet companionship. Others felt isolation, aware their labor remained large. Even after the earliest preparations were complete, the hours just before sunrise remained filled with constant motion. As medieval servants moved from urgent necessities to quieter but equally essential routines that shaped the rhythm of daily life. The darkness before dawn held a peculiar stillness, broken only by the crackle of fires, the clatter of wooden buckets, or the distant sound of livestock stirring. In these moments, servants operated almost like guardians of transition, guiding the household from night into day, while ensuring no disruption reached those of higher status. Zone of the most demanding responsibilities during this time involved managing light itself. Candles and oil lamps were precious commodities, often made from costly beeswax or tallow. Servants carefully rationed their use, trimming wicks to extend burn time and collecting hardened wax drippings to be melted and reused. Lanterns were carried through corridors to illuminate stairways and workspaces, but servants shielded flames with their hands to prevent drafts from extinguishing them. Lighting decisions required judgment. Too much light wasted resources, yet too little risked accidents or unfinished work. In larger castles, the Great Hall demanded particular attention before sunrise. This central space functioned as dining room, meeting area, and symbol of authority. Servants arranged trestle tables and benches removed after the previous evening's meal, spreading clean cloths when available. Decorative items such as banners or shields were adjusted to display family lineage proudly. If guests were present, additional seating and tableware had to be prepared quietly, so the hall appeared effortlessly ready once occupants arrived. Even minor disorder could imply incompetence among servants, and discipline within noble households often depended on maintaining flawless appearances. Animal care extended beyond horses and cattle. Hunting dogs required feeding and grooming, especially in aristocratic households, where hunting represented both sport and status. Kennel servants brushed fur, checked paws for injury, and cleaned sleeping areas. Falcons and hawks used in falconry received special attention. Falconers inspected feathers, adjusted jesses and hoods, and ensured birds remained calm before sunrise hunts. These animals represented prestige and wealth, so their condition reflected directly on the household's reputation. Medieval servants also played a key role in maintaining security during pre-dawn hours. Night watchmen or gatekeepers often remained awake throughout the night. But as morning approached, servants assisted with opening gates, inspecting locks, and ensuring no intruders or wandering animals had entered the property. In fortified castles, portcullises were raised slowly while guards exchanged reports about nighttime events. Servants might relay messages between guards and household officers, acting as quiet links in a chain of protection. Another overlooked duty involved managing smells and sanitation. Medieval living spaces accumulated odors quickly due to animals, smoke, and limited waste disposal systems. Before sunrise, servants sprinkled fresh herbs such as rosemary, lavender, or thyme across floors or near sleeping chambers to mask unpleasant scents. Bowls of scented water or burning incense improved indoor air, especially in noble rooms where comfort signaled refinement. Waste collected during the night had to be removed before people awakened, carried discreetly to refuse pits or fields used for fertilization. Textile care occupied many early hours as well. Clothing in medieval society represented wealth and social hierarchy, so garments required constant maintenance. Servants inspected fabrics for damage caused by insects or dampness, brushing wool cloaks and shaking linen shirts. If rain or dew had affected outerwear hung overnight, Servants positioned garments near fires to dry gently without scorching. Seamstresses or maidservants sometimes repaired small tears immediately, so masters would never encounter imperfect clothing. Servants responsible for children or young nobles began preparations even before sunrise. Nurseries were tidied, toys collected, and warm milk prepared. Wet nurses or caretakers checked sleeping infants, adjusting blankets or feeding them quietly to prevent crying that might disturb the household. Education for noble children often began early, so servants ensured writing tablets, books, or training equipment were arranged for tutors arriving later in the morning. In monastic environments, servant labour blended seamlessly with religious discipline. Lay brothers or hired workers rang bells marking the approach of prayer hours. They swept cloisters, filled holy water fonts, and ensured chapels were warmed enough for monks gathering in cold stone buildings. Candles were placed carefully near altars, and sacred vessels cleaned before services began. Even silence itself was managed, as servants learned to move respectfully within spaces dedicated to contemplation. Pre-dawn also served as a planning period for senior servants, such as stewards or housekeepers. These individuals reviewed inventories of food, fuel, and supplies, calculating how long resources would last. They assigned duties to junior servants, coordinated deliveries from nearby villages, and anticipated needs based on weather, guests, or upcoming events. Their managerial role required awareness of every corner of the estate, balancing efficiency with strict adherence to social hierarchy. In rural households, servant women often churned butter during early hours because cooler temperatures prevented spoilage. The repetitive motion of churning filled kitchens with rhythmic sounds, while others prepared cheese molds or preserved food through salting and smoking. Food preservation was vital, as a poor harvest or spoiled stores could threaten survival through winter months. Early morning work ensured preservation tasks did not interfere with daytime agricultural labour. Woodcutting and fuel preparation formed another essential responsibility. Servants chopped logs, split kindling, and carried bundles indoors before rain or frost could damage them. Firewood had to be measured carefully. Excessive use might exhaust supplies before winter ended. Ash collected from hearths was sifted for reusable charcoal fragments, demonstrating how nothing was wasted in medieval households. Servants assigned to travel preparations faced particularly intense mornings. If a lord planned a journey, servants packed trunks with clothing, weapons, bedding, and food provisions before sunrise. Wagons were loaded strategically to balance weight, while horses were harnessed and checked repeatedly. Pages ensured maps, letters of passage, and coins were secured. The entire travelling party depended on servants' efficiency, and delays could disrupt schedules tied to political meetings or market days. Urban servants working for guild masters prepared workshops long before craftsmen arrived. Blacksmith apprentices rekindled forges, arranging tools in precise order. Tailors' assistants laid out fabrics and sharpened shears. Printer or scribe assistants mixed ink and organized parchment sheets. These preparations allowed masters to begin skilled labor immediately upon arrival, reinforcing economic productivity within growing medieval towns. During times of crisis such as war, plague, or famine, pre-sunrise duties intensified further. Servants monitored sick household members, prepared medicinal herbs, or boiled water to reduce disease spread. They guarded food stores carefully, ensuring supplies lasted. Fear often lingered in these hours, as darkness amplified uncertainty. Yet servants continued working because survival depended on routine. Emotionally, the moments before sunrise carried complex meaning. Some servants cherished brief conversations, shared while working side by side, forming bonds stronger than those with employers. Others felt the weight of social inequality most strongly at this time, aware they laboured while others slept comfortably. Still, pride often emerged from mastery of difficult routines. Experienced servants knew they possessed knowledge essential to maintaining order in a fragile world. Weather influenced every movement. Rain turned courtyards muddy, forcing servants to lay straw paths for clean passage. Snow required clearing walkways before dawn, so nobles would not slip when leaving chambers. During storms, servants secured shutters and checked roofs for leaks, preventing damage before daylight revealed problems. As the horizon finally brightened, sounds gradually changed. Roosters crowed, church bells rang louder, and distant villages awakened. Servants transitioned from hidden preparation to visible service. Some stepped aside as masters entered halls, blending into the background while continuing work, unnoticed. Others shifted immediately to serving breakfast, pouring ale, presenting bread, or standing ready for instructions. By the time sunlight filled windows, the transformation was complete. Fires warmed every room. Animals stood fed. Tools waited prepared. Garments lay arranged, and meals steamed upon tables. The household appeared to awaken naturally. Yet this illusion existed only because servants had laboured tirelessly through the silent hours before dawn. Their work represented continuity, discipline, and survival. An invisible foundation beneath medieval society itself, ensuring that each new day began smoothly regardless of hardship, season, or circumstance. As the final moments before sunrise unfolded, medieval servants entered a phase of heightened awareness, when every completed task blended into an almost ritualistic preparation for the awakening world. The sky, still dim but slowly lightening, cast faint silhouettes across courtyards and rooftops, and servants sensed instinctively that their hidden hours were nearing an end. Yet even now, work continued relentlessly, because medieval life depended not merely on labour but on rhythm, an unbroken chain of actions linking night to day. One responsibility often carried out during these last pre-dawn minutes involved managing supplies that would sustain the household throughout the morning. Pantry servants inspected storage rooms by candlelight, checking sacks of grain for moisture, rodents, or spoilage. Barrels of ale and wine were examined for leaks, and lids tightened to prevent contamination. Salted meats hanging from beams were turned or repositioned to ensure proper curing. Medieval preservation techniques required constant vigilance, and early morning inspections prevented small problems from becoming catastrophic losses. In colder seasons, servants monitored frost carefully. Ice forming along window frames or inside water vessels posed serious inconvenience. Once nobles awoke, servants chipped away frozen edges, wrapped containers in cloth, or reheated water repeatedly to maintain usability. Frost could damage stored vegetables or crack pottery, so attentive servants patrolled storage spaces quietly, adjusting coverings, or moving fragile items closer to warmth. Another subtle yet essential task was preparing pathways within the household grounds. Courtyards accumulated mud, manure, or rainwater overnight. Servants spread straw, sand, or wooden planks to create dry walking routes. These efforts ensured that when nobles stepped outside, their fine shoes and garments remained clean. In castles with stone stairways, servants brushed away moss or moisture to prevent slipping. These acts, rarely noticed, directly protected the safety and dignity of household members. Messengers and runners sometimes began their duties before sunrise as well. Letters, written late at night, needed delivery at first light to neighboring manors, monasteries, or towns. Servants prepared horses, packed sealed messages into leather satchels, and memorized instructions from stewards. The quiet roads before dawn allowed faster travel, and important political or commercial communications depended on servants, leaving while others still slept. Within kitchens, another transformation occurred as smells shifted from preparation to invitation. Fresh bread reached completion, its crust hardening as it cooled on wooden racks. Servants brushed loaves lightly to remove ash and arranged them neatly for serving. Butter churned earlier was shaped into portions, cheeses cut, and fruit washed carefully. Cooks tasted dishes repeatedly, adjusting seasoning with herbs or salt to ensure perfection. Breakfast represented not merely nourishment, but the household's public face, especially when guests were present. Laundry servants returning from early washing duties carried damp linens into warming rooms where gentle heat accelerated drying. Steam rose faintly from cloth hung near fireplaces, filling chambers with the clean scent of soap and herbs. Servants folded finished linens precisely, stacking them according to rank: fine linen for nobles, coarser cloth for lower members of the household. Organization mattered, because confusion during busy daytime hours would reflect poorly on the staff. Some servants turned their attention to tools and equipment. Metal objects rusted quickly in damp conditions, so knives, cooking pots, and agricultural tools were wiped dry and sometimes lightly oiled before sunrise. Armor belonging to knights received polishing to maintain both functionality and appearance. Pages practiced fastening straps or adjusting buckles repeatedly, so they could assist swiftly once their masters prepared for training or travel. In noble households where education held importance, servants also prepared learning environments. Writing desks were cleaned, ink refreshed, and parchment sheets placed ready for tutors arriving later. Candles were positioned to provide proper lighting for reading during darker mornings. Even the arrangement of chairs mattered, reflecting respect for scholarship and discipline within elite families. Pre-sunrise hours also included moments of observation. Servants watched the sky carefully, reading weather signs that influenced daily plans. The color of dawn clouds, the direction of wind, or the behavior of animals provided clues about rain, storms, or fair weather. These observations were reported quietly to stewards or masters, helping determine whether hunts, travel, or agricultural labor would proceed. Meanwhile, servants responsible for security completed final checks. Gate hinges were inspected for smooth movement, chains examined, and guard shifts changed. Torches used during the night were extinguished and replaced with daytime watch positions. In towns, Shop servants lifted shutters slightly, preparing businesses to open once sunlight strengthened. Emotional life among servants during these final moments carried a mixture of relief and anticipation. The hardest invisible labor was nearly complete. Yet a new set of duties awaited. Some exchanged brief smiles or tired jokes, acknowledging shared effort without pausing long enough to attract attention. Bonds formed in these early hours often lasted years, creating communities within hierarchical systems that otherwise offered little personal freedom. Young apprentices frequently learned discipline during this transition period. Senior servants quizzed them quietly. Had the water been heated? The animals fed properly? These checks served as informal training, ensuring future generations could maintain the demanding standards required of service life. Knowledge passed orally and through repetition rather than written instruction, preserving traditions across centuries. As sunrise approached more closely, servants began withdrawing evidence of their labor. Cleaning tools were stored away, buckets hidden, ashes removed, and workspaces organized so no chaos remained visible. The goal was to create an illusion that order existed naturally rather than through exhausting effort. Medieval society valued appearances deeply, and servants became masters of invisibility, shaping environments without drawing attention to themselves. In religious communities, final preparations for morning worship intensified. Bells were positioned for ringing, hymn books arranged, and candles lit moments before clergy entered. Servants ensured pathways to chapels were clean and safe, reflecting reverence for sacred practice. For many servants, participating indirectly in religious routine offered a sense of spiritual meaning within physically demanding lives. In villages, servant women sometimes stepped briefly outdoors to feel the changing air, gauging whether smoke from hearths rose straight upward or drifted sideways with wind. Farmers relied on such observations to plan sowing or harvesting. These quiet interactions with nature connected servants to cycles larger than social hierarchy, the turning of seasons, the arrival of daylight, and the continuity of rural existence. As the first rays of sunlight finally appeared, sounds transformed dramatically. Roosters crowed louder, carts rolled along distant roads, and church bells echoed across fields. Servants transitioned from preparation into performance. Doors opened wider, footsteps became more audible, and voices shifted from whispers to respectful greetings. Breakfast trays were lifted, chamber doors knocked upon, and the official day began. Yet beneath this visible beginning lay hours of unseen effort, the warmth greeting a waking noble, the ready horse awaiting a rider, the fresh bread placed upon the table, and the clean garments prepared beside beds all testified to labor completed in darkness. Medieval servants did not simply assist daily life. They constructed morning itself. Their pre-sunrise world remained largely unrecorded by chroniclers, focused on kings and battles. But without these workers, society would have faltered quickly. They were timekeepers without clocks, engineers without titles, caretakers of comfort and survival alike. Every dawn represented their quiet achievement, a transformation accomplished through endurance, coordination, and unwavering routine. Thus, long before sunlight touched castle towers or village roofs, medieval servants had already lived hours of effort, cooperation, and resilience. While others greeted the morning as a new beginning, Servants understood that the day had begun long ago, shaped by hands that worked tirelessly in shadow, so the world could awaken in order, warmth and readiness once the sun finally rose. In the final stretch before sunrise, when darkness loosened its hold, but daylight had not yet fully arrived, medieval servants often entered the most demanding mental phase of their routine. Physical work still continued, yet attention shifted toward perfection. These moments were about refinement rather than creation, ensuring that everything prepared through the long night appeared effortless when observed by masters, guests, or clergy. The household had to look as though it naturally awakened into harmony, untouched by struggle, even though dozens of hands had labored tirelessly in silence. Servants responsible for indoor air and comfort began adjusting ventilation carefully. Medieval buildings accumulated smoke overnight from hearth fires, candles, and cooking. Before sunrise, servants opened shutters just enough to release stale air while preserving warmth. They judged airflow instinctively, guided by experience rather than measurement. Too much fresh air would chill rooms. Too little would leave lingering smoke that irritated waking occupants. This balance between warmth and freshness became an art practiced daily. Attention also turned towards sound management throughout the household. Wooden buildings creaked as temperatures changed, and servants learned which doors groaned loudly or which stair steps betrayed movement. Before sunrise, they sometimes applied oil to hinges or shifted loose boards to prevent sudden noise later in the morning. In noble households, where dignity mattered deeply, even the sound of a door opening incorrectly could be interpreted as carelessness. Servants working in armories or guard rooms conducted quiet inspections of weapons. Swords were wiped free of condensation that formed during cold nights, bowstrings checked for tension, and arrow bundles counted. Shields were arranged neatly, so guards beginning daytime duty could arm themselves quickly. These preparations carried importance beyond ceremony. Sudden threats or travelling responsibilities required readiness at any moment. Medical care, though primitive by modern standards, also formed part of pre-sunrise service. Servants tasked with caring for elderly household members or those recovering from illness checked breathing, adjusted blankets, and refreshed herbal infusions left beside beds. Simple remedies made from honey, garlic, mint, or chamomile were reheated gently. In many households, servants became informal caregivers, learning healing practices through observation rather than formal training. In estates connected to agriculture, field servants began coordinating with nature itself. They listened for bird activity, watched livestock behavior, and examined soil moisture under faint morning light. If rain had fallen overnight, they prepared alternative tasks such as repairing fences or cleaning barns rather than ploughing fields. The success of crops, and therefore survival, depended on these early judgments made before landowners even rose from sleep. Storage organization continued during these hours as well. Medieval households relied heavily on seasonal supplies, and servants rearranged storage spaces constantly to ensure older food was used first. Barrels were rolled slightly to prevent spoilage. Root vegetables checked for rot, and herbs hung to dry were turned so air reached all sides. These seemingly small actions prevented famine during harsh winters, demonstrating how servant diligence protected entire communities. Sunrise also offered one of the few opportunities for servants to care for their own necessities. They quickly ate small portions of leftover bread or porridge, often standing rather than sitting due to limited time. Some washed their faces at outdoor basins, bracing against cold water that sharpened alertness. Personal moments remained brief, yet they provided essential renewal before long hours of visible service. Communication networks expanded as dawn neared. Stable hands exchanged updates with kitchen staff regarding available eggs, milk, or meat. Gardeners informed cooks about fresh vegetables harvested moments earlier. House stewards gathered these reports, mentally constructing the day's operational plan. Medieval households functioned like living systems, and servants acted as the connecting threads, ensuring coordination across all areas. In town's street, facing servants prepared the public appearance of buildings. Shopfronts were swept clean of dust or animal droppings accumulated overnight. Merchant signs were repositioned to face morning travellers, and windows opened to invite customers. Bakers stacked bread baskets near entrances, while tavern servants aired out rooms heavy with the smell of ale and smoke from the previous evening. The town itself seemed to awaken gradually through servant activity. Weather defence remained another constant concern. Rainwater collected in gutters or courtyards overnight had to be drained before daylight traffic began. Servants repaired loose roofing, tiles discovered during early inspections, and secured laundry lines against strengthening winds. In coastal or windy regions, shutters were reinforced to prevent sudden damage. Preventative work completed before sunrise often saved costly repairs later. Animals beyond livestock demanded attention too. Cats used for controlling rodents were fed scraps to keep them active hunters. Geese guarding courtyards were released from nighttime enclosures. Even bees kept for honey production were checked during warmer seasons to ensure hives remained undisturbed. Servants understood that animals played essential roles in protection, food supply, and economic stability. Some servants performed tasks tied closely to symbolism and social expectation. Fresh flowers or greenery were placed in halls during spring and summer months, creating impressions of vitality and prosperity. Religious symbols might be dusted or repositioned to reflect reverence. In noble houses, banners displaying family colours were straightened, so visitors arriving later would witness an image of strength and continuity. The psychological contrast between servants and masters became especially visible during these moments. While nobles experienced mourning as renewal and possibility, servants experienced it as transition from invisible labour to constant attentiveness. Their awareness sharpened, anticipating commands, moods, and schedules. A skilled servant could predict a master's needs before they were spoken, and this intuition often determined long-term employment and favour. Young pages or apprentice servants sometimes practiced skills quietly before sunrise, using empty halls as training grounds. They rehearsed bowing etiquette, carrying trays steadily, or memorizing announcements they would later deliver publicly. Early practice prevented embarrassment during busy hours when mistakes might attract punishment. As light strengthened further, servants initiated subtle aesthetic adjustments. Curtains were tied back neatly, table arrangements finalized, and decorative objects aligned symmetrically. Even the direction chairs faced mattered, as spatial organization conveyed authority and hospitality. These finishing touches transformed functional preparation into visual harmony. The emotional atmosphere of these last pre-dawn moments carried a quiet sense of accomplishment. Though exhaustion lingered, servants recognized that their unseen work shaped every aspect of daily life. Fires glowed warmly, animals waited calmly, food stood ready, and rooms reflected order. The household existed in balance because servants had guided it there through patience and endurance. Finally, as sunrise itself broke across the horizon, golden light entered spaces that only hours earlier had been filled with darkness and whispered labor. Bells rang, footsteps echoed, and voices rose. Masters emerged believing morning had arrived naturally, unaware that servants had already lived half a day's effort before the sun appeared. Thus, the pre-sunrise life of medieval servants extended far beyond simple chores. It represented coordination, foresight, craftsmanship, caregiving, and resilience, woven together into a continuous cycle repeated day after day across centuries. The world of medieval Europe did not merely awaken with the sun. It was carefully prepared for awakening by countless individuals whose labor began long before dawn, ensuring that society itself could rise smoothly into each new day. Before the sun finally lifted above fields and rooftops, there existed one last hidden chapter of activity known only to those who served. These final pre-sunrise moments were neither fully night nor truly morning, and medieval servants worked within this fragile boundary where silence slowly gave way to life. The world outside remained grey and uncertain, mist hovering over farmland and narrow streets, while inside great houses and humble dwellings alike servants moved with practiced certainty born from repetition across years. Some of the last essential responsibilities involved preparing movement itself. Medieval households relied heavily on schedules tied to daylight, and servants ensured every pathway through the building allowed smooth circulation once people awakened. Rugs were straightened, stools moved aside, loose objects removed from corridors, and doors propped open strategically, so traffic could flow naturally. A noble leaving bed would encounter no obstacles, never realizing how carefully servants had choreographed the environment to support effortless motion. Servants also inspected fire safety during these moments. Fires that had burned strongly overnight now required adjustment, so they would last throughout the morning without excessive fuel consumption. Embers were spread evenly, heavy logs repositioned, and ashes gathered into metal containers. Some servants carried warm coals to smaller rooms, distributing heat efficiently across large structures. Even as the first thin rays of sunlight began touching the edges of rooftops and distant hills, the work of medieval servants before sunrise had not truly ended. Instead, these final unseen minutes represented a quiet culmination of everything accomplished during the long hours of darkness. Servants now entered a phase that blended vigilance with anticipation, ensuring that nothing disrupted the carefully constructed illusion of effortless morning order. In many households, servants conducted what might be called a final inspection of the living world around them. Experienced workers walked slowly through halls, kitchens, storage rooms, and courtyards, observing not only objects but atmosphere. They checked whether fires burned evenly, whether smoke rose properly through chimneys, whether animals appeared calm, and whether food scent spread pleasantly rather than overwhelmingly. Medieval servants developed a heightened awareness of balance. Too much noise, too little warmth, or a misplaced object could disturb the fragile harmony of dawn. Lighting remained an important concern even as daylight approached. Candles that had guided overnight labor were gradually extinguished to preserve expensive wax supplies. Servants pinched flames carefully between damp fingers or snuffed them using metal tools, ensuring smoke did not stain ceilings or fabrics. Windows were opened wider in stages, so natural light replaced artificial illumination slowly, preventing sudden glare from waking sleepers. The transition from flame to sunlight symbolized the handover from servant, controlled night, to socially visible daytime life. Another duty often completed before sunrise involved preparing for unexpected events. Medieval life was unpredictable. Visitors could arrive unannounced. Messengers might bring urgent news, or travellers could seek shelter. Servants therefore arranged extra bread, maintained spare bedding, and ensured water reserves remained sufficient. Readiness for surprise formed part of professional pride among skilled servants, who understood that adaptability defined successful households. Servants also monitored the emotional climate among fellow workers. Long hours of labor created tension, and senior servants watched for signs of fatigue or conflict that might affect performance once masters awakened. Quiet encouragement or brief shared humor helped maintain cooperation. Though rarely recorded in written histories, these relationships formed the social foundation sustaining servant communities across generations. In castle environments, defensive readiness became especially important at dawn. Night guards reported to day guards, while servants assisted in transferring responsibilities. Torches were replaced, gate mechanisms tested again, and watch posts cleaned. Servants sometimes brought warm drinks or food to guards finishing overnight duty, recognizing their shared participation in protecting the household's security, and service overlapped seamlessly during these moments. Servants working near sleeping chambers prepared for the ritual of awakening itself. Some nobles expected specific routines. Curtains opened at precise angles, prayers offered before rising, or music played softly. Servants memorized these customs and positioned themselves accordingly. A valet might stand ready with clothing draped across arms, while a chambermaid prepared washing water at the correct temperature. These rituals reinforced social identity, and servants served as the invisible conductors ensuring every detail unfolded flawlessly. Meanwhile, outdoor servants observed the natural world carefully as dawn matured. The direction of morning fog revealed moisture levels in fields. The strength of bird calls indicated seasonal change. Farmers relied on such observations for planning labor, and servants relayed this information to estate managers. Nature itself became part of the servants' workplace, and their survival depended on interpreting its subtle signals accurately. Pre-sunrise moments also included tasks connected to trade and economy. In merchant households, servants counted coins stored overnight, organized goods ready for sale, and checked locks protecting valuable merchandise. Markets opened soon after sunrise, so readiness determined profit. A delayed opening could mean lost customers, making early preparation economically critical. Cleaning continued even now, though in more delicate form. Servants polished metal surfaces so they reflected morning light beautifully. Tables were wiped one final time to remove invisible dust. Even footprints left by servants themselves were brushed away, erasing evidence of early activity. The goal remained consistent: create an environment appearing untouched by effort. For many servants, these quiet minutes before full daylight offered rare opportunities for personal reflection. Some paused briefly near open windows, breathing fresh air after hours spent indoors among smoke and heat. Others whispered prayers or thoughts of family members living far away. Medieval service often required leaving home communities, and dawn sometimes stirred feelings of longing mixed with resilience. Younger servants frequently learned discipline through observation. At this stage, watching senior staff perform final checks taught them that excellence lay not only in completing tasks, but in verifying them. Attention to detail distinguished respected servants from careless ones. Over years, these lessons shaped professional identities rooted in reliability and precision. Animal care entered another gentle phase as sunrise approached. Horses received light brushing to remove dust stirred during feeding. Dogs were released into courtyards for exercise before human activity intensified. Birds kept for food or companionship were uncovered from nighttime coverings, allowing them to greet the day naturally. Servants ensured animals transitioned smoothly from rest to activity, just as humans would soon do. In monasteries and religious institutions, servants prepared communal spaces for gathering. Benches were aligned, prayer books distributed, and candles adjusted to complement incoming daylight. The shift from solitary nighttime prayer to collective worship depended on these final acts of preparation carried out quietly by lay workers whose contributions often went unrecognized. Another subtle responsibility involved managing temperature differences between indoor and outdoor spaces. Servants adjusted doors gradually so cold morning air did not rush inside suddenly. In winter, cloaks were placed near entrances for masters, leaving warm chambers. In summer, windows were opened wider to invite cooling breezes. These environmental adjustments reflected deep experiential knowledge, accumulated over years. As the sun's edge finally appeared above the horizon, the household moved toward awakening. Servants now transitioned from planners to responders. Bells rang, footsteps echoed, and voices replaced silence. Yet even during this shift, servants continued observing carefully, ready to solve problems instantly. Spilled drink, missing garment, restless animal, or unexpected visitor. The extraordinary aspect of medieval pre-sunrise service lay in its invisibility. When masters awoke, they encountered warmth, nourishment, cleanliness, and readiness without witnessing the exhaustion required to produce them. Servants became architects of daily life, whose success depended precisely on remaining unnoticed. Thus, before sunrise in the medieval world represented far more than preparation for breakfast or chores. It was a carefully orchestrated transformation shaped by human endurance, cooperation, and skill. Servants turned darkness into structure, silence into order, and uncertainty into stability. Long before sunlight illuminated castle towers or village streets, they had already built the foundation upon which the entire day would stand, repeating this demanding ritual every morning across centuries, ensuring that society itself could awaken smoothly, confidently, and without interruption. In the lingering moments, just before the sun fully claimed the sky, medieval servants entered a final stage of quiet completion that blended routine, instinct, and long-learned discipline. These were the breaths between night labour and visible service, when the world hovered in anticipation. The darkness that had sheltered their work slowly retreated, revealing spaces transformed through hours of effort. Yet even now, servants continued refining details, aware that perfection lay not in grand tasks, but in the smallest adjustments invisible to those they served. Servants responsible for interior spaces made one last circuit through rooms rarely mentioned in chronicles. The storage alcoves, narrow staircases, servant passages, and back corridors that connected the hidden anatomy of medieval households. These areas needed to remain functional but unseen. Loose stones were reset, stray straw swept away, and tools returned to precise locations so they could be found instantly later. Medieval buildings were complex networks of movement, and servants ensured these pathways operated smoothly, like veins carrying life through a living body. Attention turned towards scent and atmosphere once more. Fresh rushes scattered across floors earlier in the morning were adjusted, so they lay evenly, releasing subtle herbal fragrances underfoot. Bowls containing dried flowers or aromatic leaves were repositioned near entrances where air circulated most strongly. Servants understood that the first sensory impressions of morning-shaped mood, a pleasant environment encouraged calm authority among nobles and hospitality toward visitors. Meanwhile, in kitchens, heat management became increasingly precise. Large hearth fires, once roaring to enable cooking, were moderated, so they would sustain warmth without overwhelming the room during busy morning hours. As dawn edged closer to becoming full morning, medieval servants entered the quiet final rhythm of their hidden world, a time when movement slowed slightly yet attention, sharpened more than ever. These last unseen moments before sunrise were not filled with dramatic labour, but with constant adjustment, refinement, and readiness. The household had been awakened in spirit long before its inhabitants stirred, and servants now ensured that nothing disturbed the delicate balance they had created through hours of effort. One of the final responsibilities involved observing light itself as it gradually entered buildings. Servants studied how early sunlight fell across floors, walls, and furniture, adjusting shutters or curtains to guide brightness gently into rooms. Too much sudden light might wake nobles abruptly, while too little could make chambers feel gloomy or neglected. Experienced servants learned how seasons altered the angle of sunrise, modifying their routines throughout the year without written instruction, relying entirely on memory and instinct. Servants also inspected the silence of the house. During the night, buildings settled and contracted in cooler air, sometimes loosening fixtures or shifting objects. Before sunrise, servants corrected these small disturbances, tightening latches, straightening hanging lanterns, or adjusting furniture slightly moved by vibration or draft. Such corrections ensured that when masters awoke, their surroundings felt stable and controlled, reinforcing a sense of authority over their environment. In kitchens, servants prepared for the moment when food would move from preparation into presentation. Bowls were wiped clean of spills, wooden trenchers aligned symmetrically, and drinking vessels polished quickly with cloth. The arrangement of food mattered nearly as much as its taste. Servants understood that visual order communicated wealth and discipline, so they treated breakfast tables almost like ceremonial displays. Water servants completed another round of distribution. Freshly warmed water was carried to washing areas, replacing containers cooled during the night. This task demanded physical strength and balance, as spilling water on stone floors could delay service or cause injury. Each step was careful, deliberate, and practiced, demonstrating the physical skill required even for routine duties. In large castles, servants responsible for public spaces began preparing for visibility. Doors connecting private chambers to great halls were opened incrementally, allowing warmth and scent from kitchens to drift outward. This subtle signalling helped wake occupants naturally. Servants rarely announced morning loudly. Instead, they allowed sensory cues, light, warmth, aroma, and distant sound, to guide the transition from sleep to activity. Outside, stable yards came fully alive under servant supervision. Grooms brushed frost from saddles, checked wagon harnesses once more, and ensured animals stood ready but calm. Horses destined for travel were positioned closest to exits, while working animals waited further inside. Such organization prevented confusion once nobles or workers arrived simultaneously seeking equipment. Servants responsible for tools and maintenance conducted final checks. Axes were sharpened lightly, buckets repaired with new bindings, and ropes examined for fraying. Agricultural productivity depended on reliable equipment, and early inspection reduced delays later in the day. When labourers gathered for field work, these acts demonstrated foresight rather than reaction, a hallmark of experienced servants. The emotional landscape among servants also shifted during these final moments. Conversations grew shorter, replaced by focused attention. Each person mentally prepared to step into structured hierarchy, where visibility increased and expectations intensified. Night had allowed cooperation and quiet companionship. Daylight restored formal roles and discipline. Servants adjusted posture, speech, and expression accordingly. In monasteries, servants completed sacred preparations with reverence. Incense was placed near altars, prayer mats aligned, and candles positioned so their flames blended with incoming daylight. Bells waited to ring at precise moments marking communal worship. Lay servants understood their labour-supported spiritual life, and many viewed these acts as participation in devotion. Despite lacking clerical status, urban servants faced growing sounds from streets awakening beyond walls. Distant vendors prepared carts, blacksmith hammers echoed faintly, and travellers passed through town gates. Servants responded by opening shop shutters fully, sweeping entrances again, and positioning goods attractively. The transition from private preparation to public engagement began gradually, guided almost entirely by servant initiative. Another often overlooked task involved managing clothing temperature. Servants rotated garments warmed earlier near fires, ensuring fabrics remained comfortable without overheating. Cloaks for outdoor wear were aired briefly, so they smelled fresh rather than smoky. These small considerations shaped daily comfort for masters who rarely questioned how such details were achieved. Young apprentices experienced these moments as lessons in awareness. Senior servants corrected stance, reminded them where to stand during greetings, and emphasized attentiveness. Apprentices learned that service required anticipation, seeing needs before commands were given. The quiet minutes before sunrise thus became training grounds, shaping future generations of household workers. Servants also checked storage areas. One final time. Doors were secured against pests, lids fastened on grain containers, and lanterns removed to prevent fire risk. Once daylight replaced artificial light, preventative care formed a constant thread through servant life. Disasters avoided rarely earned praise, but ensured survival. As sunlight strengthened further, colours slowly returned to the world. Stone walls shifted from grey to gold, tapestries revealed intricate patterns, and polished surfaces reflected brightness. Servants witnessed this transformation first, often alone, experiencing dawn as both ending and beginning. For them, sunrise marked not rest but transition into another phase of labour. Soon the household stirred unmistakably. Footsteps sounded overhead. Voices called softly, and bells rang through halls. Servants moved instantly into visible roles, opening doors, carrying trays, assisting with dressing, guiding daily routines. Yet beneath these visible actions lay hours already spent working in darkness. The remarkable truth of medieval life was that morning did not simply arrive with the sun. It was constructed patiently through countless acts performed before anyone else awakened. Servants shaped temperature, cleanliness, nourishment, organization, and emotional atmosphere so completely that the world appeared naturally ordered. Thus, the pre-sunrise existence of medieval servants extended far beyond chores. It represented a disciplined choreography repeated across centuries, sustained by endurance and collective knowledge. Every dawn stood as silent testimony to individuals whose names history rarely preserved, yet whose labour allowed castles to function, villages to thrive, and society itself to awaken each day without chaos. And as the sun finally rose fully above fields, towers, and rooftops, illuminating a world ready for activity, medieval servants had already completed the most demanding chapter of their day. Long before others greeted the morning, they had lived within it, shaping its arrival step by careful step, ensuring that when society opened its eyes, everything necessary for life was already in place. Even after sunrise began to glow faintly across the horizon, there remained a lingering stretch of time that still belonged to the servants, a quiet closing chapter of their pre-dawn world. This period existed between darkness and full daylight, when medieval servants completed the final invisible adjustments that transformed preparation into living reality. These moments were subtle, almost ceremonial in nature, marking the conclusion of hours spent sustaining the household while others rested. Servants moved through familiar routes one last time, following patterns learned through years of repetition. They paused beside hearths, listening carefully to the sound of burning wood. A properly tended fire produced a steady, comforting crackle. Too sharp a sound suggested flames burning too quickly, while dull silence meant embers fading. Servants adjusted logs gently, with iron pokers coaxing flames into perfect balance. Fire was the heart of medieval life, and mastering it required constant attention, even at the edge of morning. In corridors and stairwells, servants observed how light interacted with space. Early sunlight revealed dust invisible at night, prompting quick sweeping or wiping of surfaces. Stone floors were brushed again, and wooden rails polished swiftly by hand. These acts ensured that when nobles or guests began moving through shared spaces, they encountered cleanliness without any awareness of the effort behind it. The great halls of castles and manor houses underwent a final transformation during these minutes. Benches were aligned precisely, chairs angled towards central tables, and decorative objects subtly repositioned to create symmetry. Servants understood that environment shaped authority. An orderly hall reinforced the power and stability of the household. Even the placement of a single cup or candle holder carried meaning, signaling discipline and prosperity. Kitchen servants entered a phase of readiness rather than labor. Fires burned steadily, food rested at proper temperatures, and utensils lay arranged for immediate use. Steam rose gently from pots, carrying scents that drifted into surrounding rooms. As morning advanced, but the memory of night still lingered in cool air and long shadows. Medieval servants completed what could be considered the closing ritual of their pre-sunrise existence. These final unseen moments were marked not by heavy labor, but by constant watchfulness, the kind developed only through years of repetition. The household had been prepared, yet servants remained alert, scanning every detail for imbalance, before the day fully claimed the space they had carefully shaped. Servants moved quietly through rooms once more, almost instinctively retracing earlier paths. They checked hearths again, ensuring sparks would not leap onto covered floors. Fire represented comfort, but also danger, and experienced servants trusted verification more than assumption. Ash buckets were repositioned safely, iron tools leaned away from walkways, and fire screens adjusted to protect tapestries and furniture. These preventative gestures rarely attracted attention, yet they protected homes from disasters that could destroy entire estates. The slow arrival of daylight revealed textures hidden during darkness. Servants noticed smudges on polished tables, faint footprints left on stone corridors, or crumbs scattered near preparation areas. Cloths appeared again in their hands, wiping surfaces swiftly so that rooms appeared untouched by human effort. Medieval cleanliness was not absolute by modern standards, yet within its context servants maintained remarkable order through constant attention. In kitchens, anticipation grew stronger. Servants listened carefully for the first signal of waking. A bell pull from an upper chamber, footsteps above the ceiling, or a distant voice calling an attendant's name. They stood ready beside prepared food, hands already positioned to lift trays or pour drinks. Much of service depended on reaction speed, and servants trained themselves to move instantly without confusion. Outside, dawn reshaped the environment. Light crept across fields, revealing morning mist rising from damp earth. Agricultural servants watched this carefully because mist patterns hinted at weather conditions. If it lingered too long, they predicted rain. If it vanished quickly, they expected a warm day. These observations influenced decisions about planting, harvesting, or livestock movement. Servants acted as interpreters between nature and human planning. Stable yards began to fill with soft movement. Grooms opened larger doors to allow fresh air inside, while preventing sudden noise that might startle animals. They inspected harnesses one final time, and brushed dust from saddles so riders encountered equipment already perfected. Horses were led briefly in circles to loosen stiff muscles after night confinement, ensuring readiness for travel or labor. Servants assigned to communication roles prepared themselves to carry the first spoken messages of the day. Once masters awakened, instructions would flow rapidly. Summon a steward, prepare a horse, send a letter, gather workers. These servants memorized routes and priorities in advance, understanding that efficiency in the first hour often determined the success of the entire day. Within private chambers, attendants waited at respectful distances, balancing invisibility with availability. They listened without appearing to listen, ready to enter the moment a bell rang or curtain shifted. Medieval etiquette demanded precise timing. Entering too soon risked offense, while arriving late suggested neglect. Servants mastered this delicate awareness through experience rather than formal training. Another quiet duty involved restoring calm after night labor. Kitchens that had bustled with activity were reorganized, so they appeared serene. Tools were hung neatly, buckets stacked, and worktables cleared, except for essential items. The transformation from workplace to welcoming space occurred gradually, disguising the intensity of earlier effort. Servants also monitored temperature changes caused by rising sunlight. Rooms warmed unevenly depending on window direction, so shutters were adjusted throughout the building. Some windows opened wider to release heat, while others remained partially closed to preserve comfort. This constant environmental management required intuitive understanding of architecture and weather combined. In religious households, servants observed the first official prayers of the day from the edges of sacred spaces. Though not always participants, they ensured candles burned evenly and doors opened smoothly for worshippers arriving. Many servants felt a quiet sense of belonging during these moments, as shared ritual connected individuals across social ranks. Young apprentices often felt nervous excitement as daylight strengthened. Night allowed mistakes to pass unnoticed, but morning exposed every action to scrutiny. Senior servants reminded them through quick gestures. Stand straight, move calmly, speak clearly. These lessons prepared apprentices for lives defined by discipline and awareness. Town servants experienced sunrise differently from rural workers. Streets outside began filling with merchants, travellers, and craftsmen, and servants coordinated with this growing activity. Shop signs were positioned outward, goods displayed prominently, and doorways swept again to greet early customers. The economy of medieval towns depended heavily on how prepared establishments appeared at first light. Servants also handled minor repairs discovered during earlier inspections. A loose hinge received oil, a torn cloth was stitched quickly, a cracked wooden handle wrapped with cord. These small acts prevented inconvenience later, reflecting a mindset focused on prevention rather than reaction. Emotionally, these final moments before full morning carried a complex mixture of exhaustion and quiet pride. Servants understood they had already accomplished a significant portion of their day's work, while others still stretched from sleep. They rarely received praise, yet the smooth functioning of household life served as silent confirmation of success. The sensory world shifted steadily around them. Birds sang more loudly, bells echoed across villages, smoke from neighbouring homes rose into brightening skies. Servants sensed connection to a wider world awakening simultaneously. Though confined by duty, they participated in a shared human rhythm stretching across fields, towns, monasteries, and castles alike. As sunlight poured fully through windows, Shadows retreated and visibility replaced secrecy. Servants stepped naturally into their daytime roles, presenting breakfast, assisting with clothing, carrying messages, guiding guests. Yet their movements retained the quiet efficiency forged in darkness. To observers, morning appeared orderly and inevitable, but beneath that appearance lay a hidden truth. Medieval mornings were carefully constructed events. Servants had shaped light, warmth, cleanliness, nourishment, security, and emotional atmosphere long before anyone else awakened. Their labor bridged the fragile gap between night's uncertainty and day's stability. Thus, the world before sunrise in medieval society was not empty or still. It was alive with purposeful motion, guided by individuals whose names rarely entered chronicles. Each dawn represented a triumph of coordination and endurance. Through patience, skill, and unwavering routine, servants transformed silent darkness into a functioning world ready for life, proving that long before history's celebrated figures began their day, the foundation of civilization had already been laid by those who rose first and worked unseen. In the final stretch of the pre-sunrise world, when darkness had nearly surrendered, yet the sun had not fully risen, medieval servants entered a state of heightened awareness that blended habit, intuition, and quiet responsibility. These were moments when work slowed outwardly but intensified inwardly as servants shifted from heavy labor toward maintaining harmony. The household now existed in a delicate balance they had built piece by piece throughout the night, and their role became one of guardianship, protecting order until daylight officially claimed the day. Servants walked familiar routes almost automatically, guided by memory formed through repetition across countless mornings. They paused beside windows to judge the brightness of the sky, noting subtle color changes that signaled how quickly the household would awaken. Pale blue suggested slow waking, while golden streaks meant immediate activity. Without clocks or alarms, servants relied on these natural signals, adjusting their timing instinctively. Inside kitchens, fires settled into steady rhythms. Earlier flames had been strong enough to cook and bake, but now servants shaped them into enduring warmth rather than intensity. They rearranged embers carefully, so breakfast foods remained hot without burning. Steam drifted upward in soft waves, filling rooms with comforting scents that travelled through corridors, gently announcing morning's arrival without disturbing sleep abruptly. Servants responsible for cleanliness performed what could be described as invisible corrections. A chair, slightly out of alignment, was nudged into place. A drop of spilled broth wiped away, a wrinkled tablecloth smoothed by careful hands. These adjustments required constant observation, the ability to notice imperfections others might never perceive. Excellence in service depended on removing disorder before anyone could see it. The great halls and communal rooms became spaces of anticipation. Servants stood quietly at edges, evaluating how light reflected off polished surfaces. Metal goblets caught the first rays of dawn, and servants repositioned them subtly so brightness appeared, balanced across tables. Even light itself became something arranged, shaped to create an impression of calm authority. As the glow of sunrise strengthened, but before the household fully surrendered to daytime activity, medieval servants continued living within the last fragile layer of their pre-dawn world. These moments felt almost suspended in time, When preparation was complete yet vigilance remained essential. The servants' work no longer involved heavy lifting or frantic movement. Instead, it became an exercise in awareness, refinement, and guardianship over the order they had patiently constructed through the night. Servants moved slowly through familiar spaces, their steps guided more by memory than sight. Many could navigate corridors in near darkness, knowing where floorboards creaked or where stone dipped slightly underfoot. Now, as light revealed these paths, they inspected them again, not because they doubted their earlier work, but because experience taught them that perfection required confirmation. A misplaced stool, a drifting curtain, or a forgotten utensil could disrupt the illusion of effortless morning comfort. The management of warmth remained central even at this late stage. Fires that had burned strongly to prepare food and heat rooms needed careful moderation. Servants spread embers evenly, ensuring flames would last without consuming excessive wood. They rotated logs, cleared excess ash, and checked chimneys for proper draw. These acts were subtle but vital, allowing warmth to persist long after servants moved on to other duties. In kitchens, silence settled briefly after hours of activity. The chaotic energy of night labor gave way to poised readiness. Servants leaned slightly against walls or tables, never resting fully but conserving strength while awaiting the first summons. Steam curled upward from prepared dishes, carrying aromas through hallways, where sleeping inhabitants began to sense morning unconsciously. The kitchen became a place of anticipation, its workers ready to transform stillness into service within seconds. Water carriers completed yet another inspection of basins and pitchers. Warm water cooled quickly in stone buildings, and servants replaced or reheated it before anyone noticed. They wiped droplets from containers, so surfaces appeared dry and clean. Even reflections in water mattered. Clarity suggested purity and care, reinforcing social expectations of refinement. Outside, dawn revealed subtle changes in the landscape that servants read like experienced observers. Dew patterns indicated which paths would become muddy, prompting servants to scatter straw along walkways. Garden workers examined leaves for frost damage and gently shook moisture from delicate plants. These early interventions preserved both beauty and food supply, demonstrating how servant labor extended beyond interiors into stewardship of land itself. Stable servants worked in quiet harmony with animals now fully awake. Horses stretched their necks toward open air, and grooms led them briefly into courtyards to breathe the cool morning atmosphere. Brushes moved rhythmically across coats, removing dust accumulated overnight. Harnesses were laid neatly nearby, ready for riders who would soon arrive expecting instant readiness. Servants tasked with personal attendance entered heightened alertness. They positioned themselves outside chambers with calm composure, eyes lowered yet attentive. They listened for familiar signals. Bells pulled gently, footsteps approaching doors, or whispered calls from within. Years of service trained them to interpret these cues, instantly responding before impatience could arise. The emotional atmosphere among servants shifted noticeably. Night had allowed a sense of shared labor and quiet companionship, but daylight restored hierarchy. Conversations faded, replaced by professional silence. Younger servants adjusted posture carefully, while senior staff adopted authoritative calm. The transformation from community to structure occurred almost invisibly, mirroring the broader social order of medieval life. Religious rhythms intertwined with these moments. Bells began ringing across nearby villages and monasteries, marking official morning prayer. Some servants paused briefly, crossing themselves or murmuring silent petitions. The act of surviving another night held deep meaning in a world shaped by uncertainty, disease, and hardship. Dawn represented renewal, even for those whose labor never truly ended. Urban servants prepared thresholds for public interaction. Shop doors opened wider, goods displayed more prominently, and steps swept once more despite earlier cleaning. Merchants depended on early customers, travelers, traders, or farmers arriving at market. And servants ensured businesses appeared welcoming from the very first glance. Another task involved final removal of evidence. Ashes carried earlier were disposed of discreetly, cleaning tools hidden, and work surfaces cleared. The household appeared untouched by effort, as though order had emerged naturally with sunrise. Servants took pride in this invisibility. Success meant their labor could not be detected. Administrative servants mentally organized the coming hours. They anticipated instructions before hearing them, preparing responses to likely requests, messages to deliver, visitors to receive, workers to assemble. Medieval households operated efficiently, not because masters planned every detail, but because servants prepared solutions in advance. As sunlight spread fully into rooms, revealing color and texture, servants witnessed a transformation few others observed. Darkness retreated from corners, and spaces warmed visually as well as physically. Polished metal reflected gold light, fabrics brightened, and the environment felt alive. Servants alone knew how much effort had shaped this moment. Soon the first unmistakable sounds of waking filled the air. Doors opened, voices called softly, and movement replaced stillness. Servants transitioned instantly into visible roles, offering greetings, presenting breakfast, assisting with clothing, guiding the day's first interactions. To outsiders, morning seemed effortless, yet beneath that smooth beginning lay hours of hidden labor. Medieval servants had already lived through cold air, heavy tasks, silent coordination, and constant vigilance long before sunrise appeared. They had shaped temperature, order, nourishment, and emotional atmosphere with careful precision. Thus the world before sunrise in medieval society existed as a parallel reality, a realm of preparation and resilience rarely recorded in history. Servants were not merely helpers, but architects of daily continuity. Every peaceful morning depended upon their unseen dedication, proving that long before kings issued commands or merchants opened trade, ordinary individuals had already transformed night into readiness for life. And as the sun rose higher, illuminating castles, villages, and fields, now alive with activity, medieval servants carried on quietly, knowing that while others believed the day had just begun, they had already completed its most important work in the silent hours before dawn. As the boundary between night and morning finally dissolved, medieval servants continued to inhabit the last hidden layer of the pre-sunrise world, a span of time so subtle that few outside service ever noticed it existed. These were the moments when preparation transformed into maintenance, when servants shifted from creating readiness to preserving it. The household stood balanced and complete, yet servants remained alert, knowing that even small disruptions could unravel hours of careful work. They moved through corridors one final time with quiet familiarity, often carrying no tools at all, only observation. Experienced servants relied on their senses more than effort now. They listened to how footsteps echoed against stone, judged whether doors closed smoothly, and noticed how air moved through rooms as outside temperatures changed. Medieval buildings breathed with the environment, and servants acted almost like caretakers of that breathing structure, adjusting its comfort without drawing attention. Light played an increasingly important role during these minutes. The glow of dawn shifted rapidly, and servants guided how it entered living spaces. Curtains were tied back gently, shutters opened wider, and reflective surfaces positioned to catch brightness. In great halls, sunlight touching banners or shields reinforced noble prestige, while in private chambers soft illumination encouraged calm waking. Servants learned to treat light almost as another tool of their profession. Kitchen workers experienced a rare pause after hours of intense labor. Fires burned steadily, meals were prepared, and utensils rested in orderly arrangement. Some servants used this brief stillness to stretch aching muscles or wash soot from hands, though they remained ready to move instantly. They stood near their stations, attentive but composed, aware that the first request could arrive at any moment. Water carriers ensured freshness once again. Overnight warmth faded quickly in stone vessels, so water was replaced or reheated quietly. They wiped rims and handles to remove condensation, preserving the appearance of cleanliness. Medieval comfort depended heavily on such details, though those benefiting rarely considered the effort required. Outside, servants watched the environment awaken fully. Birds gathered along rooftops, livestock grew restless, and distant villages began their own routines. Agricultural servants read these signs instinctively, predicting how quickly workers would arrive or when gates should open. Dawn connected households to wider community rhythms, and servants served as interpreters between private estates and the world beyond. Stable workers performed gentle final preparations. Horses were walked slowly to loosen muscles, harnesses laid ready in perfect order, and feed adjusted.